Well, the first day of the Wimbledon Grand Slam is underway in England, where the world's best are battling it out on the famous grass courts. 17 Australians will feature in the main draw at the championships, the biggest Aussie contingent in 30 years. Let's get more on this with someone who has played at the very highest level, former tennis pro Walley Masur. Walley, good to have you with us today.
Hey, great to be here.
Now, it's a huge contingent, 17 in the main draw. We'll get to Alex Di Minaur shortly because he is the top-ranked Aussie there, number 11. But might we see any other Aussies making a possible breakthrough at the Old England club?
Absolutely. I think there's a couple of good stories. You mentioned 17 have made it through, so 13 of those were directly in, but we had 4 qualifiers, which is pretty exciting too. So Talia Gibson and young James McCabe qualified, which is a big effort, not easy to get through qualifying. So, look, I think Australians on grass are always in with a chance. There's a couple of players that have some pretty tough first-round draws. I mean, Alex Bolt plays Ben Shelton, who's about number 10 or 11 in the world. So that's a pretty difficult assignment. But Australians know how to play on grass. They're comfortable at Wimbledon. So I think it brings them a little closer to the field. It's a bit easier for the Australians than at the French Open, for example. Keep your eye out for Maya Joint. She's 19 years of age. She just won a WTA title in Eastbourne on grass. She also won a clay court title earlier this season. So she's really improving rapidly. Ayla Tomljanovic has made the quarterfinals here before. She certainly knows how to play on grass. And Daria Kasatkina, who of course is Russian but recently became Australian, is an excellent player. So she's someone to watch out for too. And on the men's side, you talked about Demon, and we'll get to him, but don't discount Alexei Poprin either. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah, he is up there in the top 20, as we know. Now, on Di Minaur, heartbreak last year. Injury forced him to pull out of the quarterfinal against Novak Djokovic. How do you see him progressing this time round? Because he might face Djokovic again.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's a likely fourth-round matchup. Alex plays such a physical game. You know, he's probably a slighter build than a lot of the players on tour. So he really has to kind of step up. He's almost playing above his weight in every match, and he's extremely quick. You know, he doesn't necessarily have all the knockout punches of some of the bigger players, but, you know, he fights, he's determined, he moves incredibly well, but it takes a physical toll. And, you know, it was pretty unfortunate last year when he was playing as well as he was that he picked up that injury. And I think he picked it up almost on the match point in the previous round. So there's no telling when an injury might strike. Look, Djokovic is a year older. He's been awesome, you know, obviously had an awesome career, maybe the greatest of all time statistically, there's no doubt about that. But I think at 39 years of age, maybe it's Alex's time to push through to the quarterfinals. We hope so. Fingers crossed that he doesn't get injured, obviously.
Yeah, well, on Novak, you know, his fans are going to hope that he might have one more Grand Slam in him. He's got the overall record, but surely he's going to fight to get, to equal Roger Federer's record of 8 Wimbledon titles.
Yeah, look, I just, when I started playing, Bjorn Borg was winning Wimbledon, he was winning the French Open, and he was amassing, you know, a whole bunch of Grand Slam titles. Then I think Sampras won 13 Grand Slam titles, and then Federer came along, and, you know, I just shake my head that somebody can win 20-plus Grand Slam titles. And Novak, you know, sits right at the very top. So it is pretty extraordinary, the longevity that he's had, and to play so well for so long on all the different surfaces against all these great opponents. It's been a really golden era of, you know, particularly in men's tennis with the Big Four. He just won his 100th title in Geneva just prior to the French Open, which is pretty amazing in itself. The fact that he might win 25 Grand Slams, I think he can. I think he can. I think what hurts him a little bit, though, is if you're seated in the top 4, you play the very best players in the world, probably, you know, if everything goes to plan, in the semis and the finals.
Yes.
So, for example, at the French, when he was outside of the top 4, he had to beat Zverev. He would have had to beat Sinner. He would have had to beat Alcaraz. So it just becomes that one step tougher, you know, and sometimes you lose through attrition. It's not one guy that beats you. It's a series of matches that finally brings you down. So maybe the fact that he's seated in the not inside the top 4 hurts him a little bit, but what an extraordinary career. And, you know, when Novak sets his mind to do something, he's he goes pretty close, so keep an eye out for him.
Yes. So what's your pick for the men's draw? I mean, surely Carlos Alcaraz must be the favourite. He's won the two previous titles. Good chance for a hat-trick?
Yeah, I think so. He's an exceptional player. You know, he's very creative. He's really dynamic, incredible mover. It seems that the big matches, and particularly Jannik Sinner, really tend to focus him, and he plays his best tennis when it matters most, which is pretty important in a Grand Slam. So I've got to go with Alcaraz, defending champion, obviously. Sinner looms large. You know, grass too can throw up some anomalies. You know, Bublik's playing pretty well. He's dangerous. Ben Shelton. There's a couple of wild cards on the grass that maybe don't figure as much on other surfaces that could cause some problems. But can they go all the way? I don't think so. I would definitely lean towards Alcaraz. And look, probably in the women, I think...
Yeah, it's got to be difficult to pick that because, you know, in women's tennis is quite clearly far more competitive in terms of the number of players who have the ability to win a Grand Slam. So what are your expectations there?
Well, I think you know your tennis. You seem to be, you're on it.
Little bit.
Yeah. Look, I think for me, if Sabalenka plays her best, like it was interesting at the French, wasn't it? Because Goff did a tremendous job of counterpunching, retrieving, and Sabalenka in the end made 70 unforced errors on a tricky day, a windy day, difficult conditions. I think if she plays the best tennis on grass, she's my favourite. I think she's capable of forcing more errors on grass. I don't think you can defend like you can on clay on the grass. So I think, you know, she'll force more errors out of her opponents. I think she'll have to have a bad day to lose, a very bad day. The other player to watch out for, I think, is Rybakina, as some people say. I mean, got to get your emphasis on the syllables just right there. But having said that, as you suggested, there are a lot of players that you know that those two would have to be very wary of for sure.
Yes, and what about players closer to our part of Australia, Wally? You know, there's the Chinese player Zhang Qingwen, but also the finalist of the Eastbourne, the runner-up there, Alex Ayala, the Filipina, who's been making waves in her country.
Yeah, that's right. The great thing, I mean, there's definitely a couple of players, you know, some standout players in my opinion that are the favourites. But this is the thing about Grand Slams: to win 7 matches over 14 days. You know, there's a few highs, there's a few lows. You've got to really know how to manage your time. You know, on the day off, you know, there's a lot of press requirements. You know, everybody wants a piece of you. You've got to kind of manage your time really well over the course of the fortnight. And there's a lot of quality players, and a lot of the young players have tremendous confidence, have a lot of self-belief. So they're not beaten before they go out on court. So you mentioned that young Filipino girl, for sure. You know, she's a threat. There's no question about it, you know. But Maya Joint, the Australian, beat her in the final. So, you know, keep an eye out for Maya at only 19 years of age. She's an extraordinary talent for sure, so keep an eye out for her.
Now, just finally, Wally, a lot has changed since the last time you played in the Grand Slam and in Wimbledon itself. One of the things that has changed is the climate. And, you know, this time round, there is that heat wave. Do things like that have a big impact on players itself? Yeah,
well, I think it's interesting you say a heat wave, because I think it was like 32 degrees, right? Or 30 plus?
That's a heat wave. That's a heat wave there.
Yeah, but look, I do agree. Like London, for whatever reason, it's so built up. When it's 32 degrees in London, it feels like it's about 38 degrees for some reason. It really tends to capture the heat and throw it back at you. Look, grass absorbs heat. You would assume the players have had a pretty long season all throughout the clay, leading into the French, leading into Wimbledon. So they've got to be pretty well conditioned. It's not like they're coming from a Northern Hemisphere winter down to an Australian Open where they can get a little bit stung by, you know, big changes in temperature. So I'm assuming the players are going to handle it pretty well. But once again, maybe it falls into the Australian players' hands, doesn't it? You know, slightly warmer conditions. The grass will be faster. I think that helps the Australian players, and a few are in action as we're speaking. So the tournament is underway. I think Jordan Thompson and Chris O'Connell are both playing as we speak. So it's underway. So if anybody's willing to switch on, Wimbledon is happening.
Well, they can switch on, but after this program. Well, Walley Masur, really appreciate your time today. And fingers crossed for the Aussies at Wimbledon. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.